Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a third submission by Carol of the horse Sky. Sky's a 17-year-old mare that she's been working on for a little while now. She's sent in 2 previous submissions. But here we see a big improvement over the last 2 submissions. We see a much more swing in the walk. Now you can see that this horse is still quite hollow in the back there a little bit. She's still got that high point of her hips there a little bit. But if she keeps working the way she's going to, and this is a perfect example, this is the kind of horse that really has almost no ability to flex its hocks at all. But what you'll find is as they develop in this method that they will be able to flex their hocks to the degree that they can. And really even very surprising is how far many of them can go. That's the kind of way that we look at it, is that, Prix St. George is the jumping off place, is how it used to be thought of, as that's just a horse in ordinary usefulness, and then from there we develop higher levels of collection, that sort of thing, and go into the Grand Prix. Or a horse might become a jumper, but in the minds of people who know how to train horses, Prix St. George would be considered just the jumping off point. The horse knows changes, maybe some tempies to 3 or 4s, nothing too serious, but has developed a level of collection. Really about the level you'd like to start jumping a horse. But that is rarely seen these days. But when you see jumping riders like Marcus Enning and realize how incredible this can be if you're willing to put the time in. He just retired his horse that came in second at the previous Olympic Games. Not this last one, but just retired after 20 years of Grand Prix work, jumping at the Grand Prix level. So that's really what a great horseman is to me. And what a great horseman Carol seems to be turning out to be here. This is really good work. It's always great when I see someone like Carol here who, seems like she's just starting at the total beginning at the first video that we saw, and already since this is the third submission that we've seen, this horse is looking so much better. And it's going to stretch a lot deeper as we go on here. She's just starting to get the horse to work a little bit in shoulder in. And that's just what you want to do. I see you raising your inside hand when the horse got a little difficult, and that's exactly what you wanted to do, so the horse can't bear down on your rein there a little bit. But this walk is swinging much, much better than what we've seen in the past. As she said in her letter to me on this one, the horse almost seems to be acting like a young horse again. That's exactly what they will do. Just like a person, if you're not dead, you can certainly improve to a great deal. If you're not in shape, you can get yourself in shape. Even if you can only use part of your body, that part of it can be in shape, which will help all the rest of you. And that's kind of the same thing true with horses. Now we can see here trying to get a little more lateral movement. Right there, you might want to just touch her a little more actively with your stick there, but you end up getting the right thing, which is the stretch. And this is coming now, and it really seems to be coming from behind now. That is, you've understood how to get the horse to activate behind and send the horse through to the bridle, and that's the most important thing one will ever learn, as that's the basis for everything else that we do. But if you go back and compare this with the first video that we saw of this horse, there's really no comparison. This horse is already really starting to look like something very different than it did. And that's the thing we have to get in mind, that 17 years old is not an old horse, folks. Horses should be lasting well into their 20s and 30s if they're trained correctly in the beginning. But of course, just like so many children who get forced into things like, high school football and grade school football and, trying too hard at things too young, they end up couch potatoes later on. They just get too much taken out of them young, and that's really what we never want the horse to lose the enjoyment of the work, and that's one of the biggest things. If we press horses too hard, then it becomes difficult. Then we have to start beating them to do things because they just don't like it. But if we get them working over their backs and get them fit enough to do the things we ask them to do, most horses are quite willing to do what we ask them to do. Good walk here, showing a little more activity. Can get lower, much lower, and it does towards we get to the end of this tape. But you're really showing a good, steady progression of your work here in this video compared to the ones we've seen before. Really improved your work in the work in hand a great deal. And now what you need to do is just start working on that, getting them to step over a little more. We want to get to the point where we can do shoulder ins down the rail and this sort of thing. But much better stretch there, notice, after that. So you certainly got the right thing to happen after that little bit of lateral work that you did there. And that's the thing to realize, how important that lateral work is. Remember what we're always looking for. There's a point at which, when the horse steps under the middle of its body, when we get it to step under just the right place, when it pushes up, it will push the back up. And when the back pushes up a little bit, the neck will tend to want to go a little bit forward. And that's at the moment, as you feel it wanting to stretch down, that's when we just give and let the horse follow that stretch down. Much better walk here. Still a little bit slow behind, but this, now watch as the horse's head goes down, how much freer the hind legs become. And that's true in all of the gaits. How anybody can argue with this is beyond my ability to understand, because once you've actually seen horses change and go from what this horse was to what it now is starting to look like and stretch into the contact, I don't know how anyone could argue, because pulling the shoulders and pulling the neck up in the air certainly would never improve this. In fact, all that would happen would be that the horse would just become hollower and hollower and more difficult to ride. Which is what happens to so many older horses. You know, they've been ridden their whole lives, and you know they get to be, you know, some much earlier than this. But let's say an average of 12 to 15, and already they're going down the tubes, and that's way too young. I mean, 12 should be just considered middle age. I mean, 12 to 22 should be the middle ages of a horse's life. Now this walk is really starting to go here. A lot more active. You see, he has that little bit of a stuck in the mud position, and notice how we always see that when the horse's head comes up. Now she's working for a little more shoulder in here, and that's exactly what you want to do. And then once you release it, look how you get the horse to just stretch on down. So the kind of horse kind of compresses its back up to a little bit as it begins to step up underneath the body, as you find that perfect spot for it to step under the middle of its body. And then all of a sudden you let go, and wow, the horse follows the stretch right on down and swings through behind. Much better walk here, so he's starting to swing a little bit. The lower it goes, the better the back end looks, and that's what we want to be looking at all the time. We're looking for whatever we do to change how the back end moves. That's what's important. Everything else falls into place relative to that. And of course, that's what it means to ride a horse from the back to the front. All these people with their side reins and tight side reins and draw reins and German reins and all these different devices are all things that do exactly the same thing. They pull the horse's neck back and into the body, which is never what we want to do. We want the horse, as it becomes able to, we want it to bring, it will elevate the head and neck as high as it can relative to its conformation. But all horses that it can at least flex the hocks as much as this one can eventually collect. And of course, these horses that need this, like a horse like this who has very little flexion in his back legs, because he's pretty straight, built sturdy bait. Once again, look how as soon as he stretches down, how much more flexion there is in the hocks and how much deeper the step is. So that's exactly what we want to have happen. And this is such an improvement. The horse even looks much better than it did in the last video that I saw. So we want to just keep trying to work for that little more of a shoulder in, getting the horse to step a little deeper, but take it, you've got a good stretch happening, so don't worry too much about that. As long as you have the stretch going, remember, that's why we use the shoulder in to get the horse to lift its back. That's what the shoulder in is for. It's not so we can go sideways, so we can make this pretty sideways movement. All movements in real dressage, have the aim of developing the horse physically, or to help you. They're tools that we use, for instance, to get the horse to body in the position that we want it to be in, that is with lifting of the back. So that was a big improvement in the work in hand work. Very good, much improved over what I saw before. The horse is getting much more rhythmic, starting to stretch much deeper. Just keep working for a little more of the lateral movement as you go. That's the biggest thing, and as you do, you'll get the stretch a little deeper. And of course, the horse will gain strength. So starting off here in the walk, this is not bad. A little bit slow starting off. Not quite coming through yet, as you can see. But you're starting to develop a really good position. You've really got yourself stretched up, and you've got the idea to lift those shoulders and come back behind the motion when the horse doesn't come through, which is exactly what you want to do for two reasons. A, it helps to put a little more weight on the back end, but it also takes the weight directly off of that spot directly above the horse. That is, if we sit absolutely straight, all the weight of our body is going straight down onto the saddle. So sometimes when we want to get a horse to come through, we lift up and come back behind the motion a little bit, send the horse through. But when we do that, we don't want to slouch in the saddle. We want to stretch up like a yoga stretch, keep our shoulder blades flattened into our back as if you were leaning back over a barrel, so to speak. So you really have to tighten your abdominal muscles in order to do that. But you've really gotten a good feel for this, and this walk is starting to happen here. Getting much more swinging. The lower it gets, the more we swing the back end. Which again, always want to be watching what the back end is doing. That tells you the story. If it's starting to slow down here as it is a little bit, that tells you we're getting a little bit too slow, not quite getting enough swing to really develop the horse. But now as you start to open him up again, and we start to see a little bit more. The key to training horses is just the same as rehabbing horses. And one like this, you could say, well, this is a bit of a rehab project because 17 years old, hasn't been round over his back, is quite hollow. You know, the back isn't developed at all, but it doesn't matter. It takes about the same amount of time once you get them over their backs to develop them to the point of collection. Now, some, of course, the horses with super conformation, who have these amazing back ends and amazing ability to flex in the hocks, we would be able to achieve a lot of that a little sooner. But even those horses have to go through the same amount of time, about 2 years, to pull their withers up through the shoulders and really get where they're supposed to be. This whole idea that we hear people talking about, that somehow or other, if you pull the neck up in the air, it's somehow going to pull the shoulders up. It doesn't do anything of the sort. All it does when you pull the head up and pull the neck back is it braces the shoulder against the top, it braces the neck against the top of the shoulder. So as the horse pulls, it kind of flips its front end out. And that's what creates this kind of phony trot that we see where the horses don't come through behind, but they flip the front end forward. Pretty good shoulder in here, though, in this leg yield. Remember, leg yield is just a preliminary exercise to the shoulder in. But that had really pretty good rhythm there, all the way across there. I didn't see it really lose rhythm much, so that's really developing very well. Would want to here, remember to use your legs alternately in the walk also, if you're not doing that. I can't tell, of course, watching a video whether you are or not, but remember that you always want to use your legs alternately. That is, as you feel the inward swing of the horse, you just let your leg follow in a very relaxed kind of way and just bump the horse, and then you'll feel the opposite on the other side. So in the walk, we use our legs alternately. That's also how the horse knows the difference between that we want a bigger walk as opposed to we want to go into a trot. If we want to go into a trot, then we're going to use both legs simultaneously. But this is certainly starting to look much, much better, and this horse is becoming a much more attractive horse in the process. And this one will continue to become a more attractive horse as time goes on. You won't even know this horse a year from now if you continue this work. It'll look like a very different horse, and it will look 10 years younger. But just always remember, whether it's a baby or a 17-year-old, it takes about that same amount of time. It takes about a year to establish the top line, and about 2 years to confirm that top line to the point that the horse can develop real collection. That is, really lower the 3 joints of the hind legs and thrust up into the back to lift the forehand off the ground. That's what real collection is, not this phony shortening of the stride that we see so many people doing today. Same thing here, not bad. Just, you can see how it slows down, speeds up a little bit, but you're doing a good job of maintaining the rhythm here as best you can. Now, one thing you want to think about, I see when I see you go by in silhouette, you're a little bit in a chair seat. That is, your legs seem a little bit out in front of you from where your hips are. Remember, we would always like to have our heels hang directly under our hips. So be sure and take a look at the saddle. Of course, always be sure that the saddle fits the horse as well. And that if we do any alteration to the saddle to help the rider, then we have to be sure that the saddle still fits the horse. So as you can kind of see here, your leg kind of sits out in front of you on the saddle. Now, normally when we do that, we usually like to lift the back of the saddle a little bit. But once again, we can only do that if the front of the saddle fits as well. So if you haven't done so, I highly recommend that you take a look at my wife's saddle fit lecture and see if we can't balance this saddle a little better to get your leg underneath your hip instead of being so out in front of you. That is really a function of the saddle. I see people all the time say, oh, I'm not strong enough to keep my legs back underneath you. Well, if you have a good fitting saddle, it will let your legs hang underneath you. So if you get in the saddle and you automatically feel like you're sitting in a chair, and your legs are hanging out in front of your hips, that is, your heels are not underneath your hips, the saddle is not really balanced well for you, because it really shouldn't take any muscular effort to let your legs hang down. If they do, a lot of people are very confused by that, and struggle with their seat, not realizing the only problem is the saddle that they're riding in. So just like if you were going to play tennis, you wouldn't go out and get your grandfather's old warped tennis racket and go out and try to play, that hadn't been strung in 25 years, and go try to learn how to play on it, because it would be very difficult. Well, we want to do the same thing when it comes to saddles and riders. Now that walk really freed up quite nicely. She came around through there. I see the stretch gets a little deeper. Now she says that normally the horse stretches quite a bit deeper, as we're going to see at the very end, and normally keeps that frame. But evidently there's a horse in a pasture next door that she says is he wants to put his attention on from time to time, as she's having a little more difficulty than normal keeping him in the correct position. But what I would say here is I see a huge improvement of what I saw before. Really good there. Now notice how every inch the horse goes down in front, it swings further through behind. Now there we would want to make that a little more active. The problem is I think you're trying to do a little bit of a leg yield there, and you would just want to activate the horse. Use your whip on the behind the inside leg there. Remember, whenever we reinforce the leg with the whip, we always use the leg first and then the whip right after it and right behind it, not way back on the horse's hip bones or anywhere else on the shoulders in various places. So we want the horse to relate the touch of the whip to the relate of the leg. That's why we also have touch with the leg first before the whip. Even if we've touched once with the leg, twice with the leg, the horse doesn't respond. By the third time, I'm going to tap with my whip. Sufficient to get the horse to step forward. And always being sure that we can tell the difference between a horse that's flinching and a horse that's actually engaging and coming forward. Very often when you touch a horse, they'll kind of flinch, which makes the rider feel like they've done something, but then the horse just goes right back to the walk it was. So the correct impulse from your leg is that you feel the horse swing further actively forward from behind. If it just kind of shrugs its shoulders and kind of shakes a little bit, in a sense of kind of impulse, you kind of feel that impulse, but it doesn't go anywhere. That's a horse that's not letting the energy flow through its body. In other words, if it just flinches instead of actually moves. So a lot of horses get very good at that, and they get very good at training the riders, not to use their legs or their whip. But we mustn't let that happen. We must never be cruel with the whip, but we do have to use it sufficiently with each horse that we're working with, that if it has been brought to a certain level where it can certainly understand that what a touch of the whip means. Now, there isn't any time that you should take a whip. I mean, if your horse feels so dull that you want to take your whip and crack it with it, and that's not the thing to do, because that's a horse that's simply not fit enough to be ridden. Now, always remember that it's the nature of a healthy horse to be ridden and to want to move. That is when we get on them. If they don't, there's always something wrong. An ill-fitting saddle, bad shoes, an unfit horse, sway back, kissing spine, all these things. So the nature of a healthy horse is to want to move and want to come out and exercise, because in their minds, their lives depended on that. Now that's really a good walk there, and starting to swing much more actively. That's the best walk I've seen so far. Now we can see when that horse got a little deeper there for a moment, the hind legs didn't have that stuck in the mud kind of look about them like that. Now it really starts to swing. This is really good work. Carol says she's in Pennsylvania, not sure where. I used to live in Unionville myself, but Pennsylvania is a very big state. So hopefully Carol is going to be a good influence on the people around her. She said people are already asking her what she's doing to improve her horse. So hopefully she will start to help people. And that's my goal for all of you. I hope every single one of you, whether you're an Archer Ride Associate trainer or not, but my goal in this is to, if you do your work quietly and improve your horse, people will start asking you, what are you doing? Because you will take a horse like this that looked like nothing, like a 17-year-old horse that might have looked worn out, and you can just completely regain their youth and take them to levels that you never dreamed possible before. And unfortunately, so many people today just think it's all about buying the piece of horse flesh. I mean, I remind you, for instance, that Charlotte Desjardins' horse was only a $5,000 horse. The best riders don't need $1 million horses, to be able to train a horse. Unfortunately, that's what's happened today. Is dressage has turned into a sport where it's just all about who can afford the fabulous moving horse that's moving upside down, unfortunately, and the judges started to pin that. And that's wherein we've seen the complete downfall of dressage, and we've seen it turn into the most cruel sport out there, which is a really shame, really is a shame, and is so much not what dressage is supposed to be about. But of course, as soon as you make anything in the world into a competition, there's always people that are willing to cheat. There's so many people that are just really have so little self-worth that the only thing that gives them any is to have someone else give them kudos and such. Like, in other words, like buying a horse that wins ribbons and not caring whether how much you pay for it or how long it lasts, as long as you win some ribbons on it. And these kind of people will never be real horsemen. They'll never have a horse long enough to actually become one. Anyway, I almost think that it basically takes 4 years to put the complete basic education on a horse, that you can bring it up and it's consistently in collection, that you can get consistent collection. And that still doesn't mean that you collect a horse every day. This is the biggest thing to realize, is that collection is the highest level of the exercise that you do. So just like a marathon runner, you can't do extreme collection every day and think your horse is going to stand up to it. This is why they all fall apart these days. So a horse needs to rest. If you consider that, for instance, like whatever your dressage test is the hardest thing the horse does, by the time you prepare for it at a new place, and you usually end up warming up a little bit longer than maybe you do at home, and then you ride the test, which takes even more time, and sometimes riding 2 or 3 tests in a day, which is never really recommended. I never recommend people ride more than 2 tests in a day on any horse, because that's just too much. But a couple of tests at the lower levels, and once you get to the upper levels, they really should do no more than 1 test a day. But after we do that test, then we have to come back the next day and do nothing but stretch. And unfortunately, this is part of what's problem with the horse shows, is that people will go and they ride too many classes and they burn the horses out. I see a lot of people wasting a lot of money doing that, where they sign up just this idea that they're going to go in 6 classes, and by the time they've done 2, the horse is finished, and now they've thrown away $1,000 in entry fees. So we should keep that in mind. The lower levels, say, up to 2nd level, perhaps, if you're thinking about traditional dressage competition here, you could do maybe 2 classes a day, but beyond that, you would want to keep it to 1, because it would just take too much out of the horse. So that walk got to a pretty good place there. I think it probably can swing even a little more. I think at the very end of this, we do get a little better swing. But you can see, starting off, the horse is a little resistive, not quite to get into the stretch. And this is where you just want to send the horse on as best you can. And if you can't get into the stretch within a reasonable time, then you'd want to just come back to the walk. Or that is reasonable within a few minutes, really. You see the horse is still a little hollow, but it's starting to swing. So you're starting to work it out here. Once again, notice as the horse stretches down into the contact how much more active the hocks become. So in the short period you've been doing this and really learning on your own, with the exception of coming to some clinics and auditing, you're really doing a great job. I really look forward to seeing you at the clinic in a few weeks here. Really starting to get some good moments here. And notice how it's all about what she's doing here with her legs, and you're doing just the right thing. Just keep impulsing the horse forward, instead of trying to hang on the reins. Someone asked me about half halts, and I say this all the time. I never use the term half halt. The term that we use is just to balance the horse, which is what the word means in French. But when they translated it into English, somehow they came up with this term of half halt, which has made everybody think this is something you do by stepping on the brakes, and it really is just the opposite. The only way you can really rebalance a horse is to get it to track deeper into the body. Now this stretches come around really, really well, and this horse is stretching deeper under the body. So you are doing what we'd like to call, if anything, I just say balance the horse, is to send the horse more actively underneath itself. So that's where any, if you want to call it half halt, I just call it a rebalancing of the horse, begins. It begins by asking the horse come deeper. Now, that's different if a horse is running away with you and speeding around the ring at 900 miles an hour, then you'd want to just slow it down. But remember, the biggest thing is we never conflict the aids, and that's what we see so many people doing, all these crank and spank riders and roll crew riders. They're basically conflicting the aids all the time. They're pulling the horse's head in and kicking it at the same time. So, of course, this is what leads to so much resistance in the horses, and, of course, to so many broken horses that we see today. And it's really sad when we see that, it's really almost the upper level horses today look way worse than the younger ones, which is a very sad state, when we think about it. They start out pretty good. You see horses as 4 or 5-year-olds just beginning, and they don't look too bad yet, though they usually have their heads up too high. But then you see them at Prix St. George, and they're completely sway back by this point. That is, if they're good enough movers that they can break them down that far and still have something left. And that's been the real takeaway that people need to understand about these $1 million horses that are out there today. I mean, they have such great conformation and so much movement, and they're so athletic, that they can kind of pull their heads down to people who don't know what they're looking at, which seems to be the majority of dressage judges today. Either that or they're afraid to tell the truth. I mean, and we often see this too. You'll see that if somebody's a nobody and does the same ride as somebody who's a big somebody, the somebody will get 30 points higher than that nobody who just had just as bad a ride. So there's so much corruption in the sport these days that it's almost pointless. If you can't play the game at the $1 million level, they've priced everybody else out of it so that you have all these people that can barely ride but are wealthy enough to afford these $1 million horses. They can congratulate themselves for ruining yet another horse. Now this is starting to swing a little better here. Now the back end is starting to step under. Look how much flexion you're getting out of the hocks. Now this horse still needs to stretch down quite a bit more here at this point, but it's really coming very nicely. Going back to Klaus Bockenhall, the last really great classical rider we had in the ring, who won the gold medal on a $5,000 horse. Actually, it was a $3,000 horse, a police horse that he trained, and beat all the people on their $1 million horses, as Charlotte Desjardins has just done with her $5,000 horse. So I hope everyone is inspired by that. I guess the idea, we must get back to dressage being about the training and not being about the individual piece of horse flesh. Now, if the horses are trained equally, obviously the more fancy horse or whatever would probably win over the two. But the criteria should be the training, not the horse flesh itself. We're seeing far too many upside down, $500,000 horses just going around the ring completely upside down. And of course, the judges are all afraid to give those people scores. And that's what we have to change. But Carol, this has been a really good workout for you, and it shows a huge improvement. And what I'd like to say here is congratulations very much, because I'm inviting you to join our associate trainer program. What I look for is people who really devote themselves to this and can really show me in a short time, as Carol has done here, that she has a real aptitude for this work and has really applied it very patiently to this less than easy horse. So Carol, congratulations. I invite you to join the instructors program and get involved there and begin to learn more. And I hope that as you do, as she wrote to me, she hopes to inspire a lot of people around her. Well, I hope you do too, and I'm sure that together we will, because this horse is going to turn into a very beautiful thing when you're done with it. So you've done a great job with this. I look forward to talking to you soon and having you join our associate trainer program. Really, really great work. Now, this is the kind of walk that we're looking for there. So remember that the really important thing is just that you get there every day. As she said today, this horse was kept putting its interest on this other horse, getting distracted a little bit, but still was a very good business-like and workman-like workout of the horse. As I said, try to get your saddle a little better balanced so your leg can hang under you a little bit if you can. But these are small things. You've really learned how to use your back And that is something that I always look for. You've really gotten that right away of how to affect the horse with your back by stretching up and back and sending the horse through from your leg. What we might call a half forward. So really great job. She was also telling me how she's realized that she does this work and just halts. The horse usually halts square. And that's exactly right. Everyone should realize I never school those. So great work and congratulations. Look forward to you in the program.